The morning sun barely peeked through the heavy clouds, casting a muted light over the city skyline. I sat in my small office, staring at the final draft of my investment strategy. This was it, my chance to prove everyone wrong. My thoughts raced as I ran over the numbers one last time, but doubts gnawed at me. I had no experience managing large sums, no fancy degrees. Just a dream. My phone buzzed. It was Clara, my business partner. "Remember, today's the day," she texted. My heart skipped. I had worked months on this, desperate to make a mark in a world dominated by sharks. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone to call her. "Clara? This better work," I muttered to myself. She answered quickly. "You got this. Remember, we're offering something the market hasn't seen before," she said, her voice steady but laced with nervous energy. "But if we fail?" I hesitated. Clara cut in, "We won't fail. Not today." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone, uncertainty hanging over me like a storm cloud. "It's now or never," I whispered, standing up to prepare for the meeting with our potential investor, a man who could make or break our future. The investor was waiting. I could feel the tension building with every step I took toward his office, a cold sweat on the back of my neck. Clara had reassured me, but doubts clouded my mind. What if this strategy, my dream, wasn't enough? What if it fell apart, just like every other attempt I had ever made? The doors to the office opened, and I was greeted by a tall, stern-looking man in his late 40s. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. "You're late," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I quickly apologized, fumbling for words. "We'll make it worth your time, I promise." He simply nodded and gestured for me to sit across from him. The tension in the air was almost palpable, like we were about to make a high-stakes deal, even though this was just the first step. The meeting started with formalities, but every word he spoke felt like it carried the weight of my future. The meeting dragged on, with the investor asking questions that felt like they were pulling the very soul out of me. Each question seemed to dig deeper into the foundation of my strategy, and I struggled to maintain my composure. Clara had warned me that this man didn't make deals lightly, but I wasn't ready for the pressure. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice sharp, piercing through the silence. My mind went blank. I took a deep breath. "Because I'm not just asking for your money," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm offering a partnership. I have something different, something that will work in today's market." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And I'm willing to bet everything on it." There was a long silence before the investor leaned forward, studying me closely. "Tell me more," he said, his expression unreadable. The next hour felt like an eternity. The investor's questions came fast and hard, and every answer I gave seemed to raise more doubts than solutions. Yet, as I spoke, I could feel myself growing more confident. I had to sell him on more than just numbers. I had to sell him on the idea that I could be trusted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sat back in his chair. "You have passion," he said, his tone softening. "But passion alone doesn't drive results. We'll see if you can back up your words." My heart raced. Had I done enough? Was this the break I'd been waiting for? Or was it just another empty conversation? As I left the office, my mind raced with thoughts of what came next. Outside the building, the air was thick with humidity, but it felt like a weight had been lifted. I had done everything I could. Now, it was out of my hands. As I made my way down the street, my phone buzzed. Clara's name flashed across the screen. "How did it go?" she texted. I stopped for a moment, staring at the message. My mind was still spinning. I replied with a simple, "I think it went well." But deep down, I wasn't sure. The future of our business hung in the balance, and all I could do was wait. The market was shifting, and I could feel it in my gut. As I sat in my small office, staring at the ticker on my screen, the numbers didn't lie. My investment was tanking. What had once seemed like a brilliant idea was now a sinking ship. I quickly called Clara, hoping she had answers, but the panic in her voice mirrored my own. "Ethan, this is bad. Really bad, she said, her words sending a chill down my spine. It wasn't just one bad day. The market as a whole was in freefall. The investor, Daniel, had warned us of volatility. But this was beyond what we expected. Desperation crept in. I had no plan B. Every dollar I'd invested was now at risk, and the pressure to deliver weighed on me like an anvil. We need to make moves, fast, I said, trying to rally some confidence. Clara agreed, but her voice lacked the usual certainty. We have to stay calm, she replied, but I wasn't sure if I could. My hands shook as I went through the numbers again. I had no other choice but to keep pushing forward. But how much more could I gamble? I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The numbers were dropping faster than I could keep track of, and my phone buzzed incessantly. Each notification was a reminder of how far things had gone wrong. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it all settling on me. Clara had sent me an article about a global recession hitting the markets hard, but that only made things worse. I wasn't sure how to react. We can't back out now, I said aloud, more to myself than to anyone. The thought of pulling out would mean admitting failure, and I wasn't ready to do that. But every rational part of my mind screamed that we were in too deep. I needed advice, and fast. I called the one person I thought might offer guidance, my mentor. As the phone rang, my stomach twisted. What would he say? Was he watching the same chaos unfold? I had to know if it was still possible to turn this around, or if we were already too far gone. Hello? My mentor's voice crackled through the phone, a familiar but distant sound. I explained the situation as quickly as I could, my voice shaky. You're in trouble, Ethan, he said bluntly, without hesitation. I warned you about risky bets, but this could ruin you. My heart sank. What do I do now? I asked, the panic in my voice impossible to hide. He sighed on the other end. The first step is always accepting that you might have to cut your losses, he said, his tone more cold than I expected. But you can't just give up. You need to think strategically. Look at your options. Can you liquidate some assets, restructure, or are you going to let this destroy you? His words were like ice water, snapping me out of my panic for a moment. I had to do something, but what? I'm in too deep, I murmured, staring at the flashing numbers on the screen. No one's ever truly in too deep, he replied. You just have to decide when to pivot. After the call, the weight of the decision I had to make hit me like a freight train. I knew I had to either cut my losses or gamble everything on a last-ditch effort. My phone buzzed again. It was Clara. We can salvage this, but it means taking a huge risk. Are you in? I stared at the message for a long time, considering it. If we went all in now, there was a chance we could turn things around, but it would take everything I had left. My financial future, my reputation, all of it was on the line. I'd almost hear the ticking of the clock, the sound of time running out. Was I willing to risk everything on a shot in the dark? What would Daniel say if he knew we were this desperate? I didn't have much time to decide. I took a deep breath, tapped out a quick response to Clara. Do it. Let's go all in. The moment I sent it, I felt a pang of regret. It was done. There was no turning back now. It was done. I had committed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The next few days would either make or break me. I needed to prepare for whatever came next. The next morning, I walked into the office with a new resolve. Clara was already there, pacing as usual. Any updates? She asked, looking up from a pile of papers. I nodded. We go big or we go home. I've placed the last bet. There's no turning back. Clara looked at me for a moment, her eyes narrowing. You're sure about this? She asked, her tone full of concern. I'm sure. It's the only shot we have, I replied. Clara didn't argue. She just nodded, accepting it. All right then, let's do this. We got to work, setting up the final pieces of our strategy. The storm had hit, but now we were weathering it together. The calm that followed the decision felt like the eye of the storm. The markets had been volatile, and every day brought new shocks. But now, as I sat back in my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I reviewed the updated numbers again, but they only made me feel more anxious. The investment had been a calculated risk, but now, it felt like we were out of control. I called Clara. "Something's off," I said, my voice tight with tension. "What do you mean?" she replied, trying to mask the worry in her tone. "I've been going over everything. It's not adding up. Are we missing something?" The silence on the other end was enough to confirm my fear. We were both in over our heads. Clara took a deep breath before answering. "We have to trust the strategy," she said, but I could tell she didn't believe it. We both knew the truth. We were gambling with more than just money now. The call ended, and I was left to wonder if our next move would be our last. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pressure was suffocating, and I found myself pacing the small confines of my apartment, wondering where we had gone wrong. I tried to stay optimistic, but the reality was hitting harder than I expected. I thought back to the early days when everything seemed so possible. It felt like we were building something. Now, every decision seemed to lead to a dead end. Clara called me again, her voice tinged with unease. "I have been digging into the market trends more, Ethan. We've missed a critical signal," she said. I sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. "What do you mean?" I asked, dread creeping in. "The recession. It's not just a dip, it's deeper than we thought," she explained. My heart sank. I had known it, but hearing it from Clara made it all too real. "We need to get ahead of this before it spirals out of control," she continued. But I knew we were already too far down that road. The next day we met with our mentor, hoping for some clarity. His office was quiet, but the tension in the air was thick. "I've been following your moves, Ethan," he said, his voice low and careful. "And I'll be honest, I didn't think it would come to this." I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, avoiding his gaze. The shame was overwhelming. "What do we do now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mentor leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving me. "You need to cut your losses, Ethan. The market isn't going to stabilize anytime soon, and you're risking everything on a sinking ship." The words felt like a punch to the gut. "But we can still turn it around," I said, almost pleading. He shook his head slowly. "There's nothing left to turn around. You've already pushed it too far. You need to make a hard choice." Clara and I exchanged looks. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. We left the meeting with little more than confusion. Cutting our losses felt like the only logical move, but the idea of giving up now, after everything we had put into this, was unbearable. I walked back to my office in a daze. My phone buzzed again. It was Clara. "We can still fix this," she said in a text. I stared at the screen, wondering if we were just fooling ourselves. We had pushed too far. And now, everything we had built was at risk. I had invested more than money in this venture. My pride, my identity, they were all wrapped up in this. How could I just let it go? But deep down, I knew Clara was right. We had no choice. A decision had to be made, and quickly. I couldn't keep running from the inevitable. We had to act, whether I was ready or not. The decision was made. We would try to salvage what we could. Clara and I agreed to liquidate some of our assets, but even that felt like a betrayal of everything we had worked for. I spent the next few hours preparing the necessary documents, a sense of dread settling in with each signature. There was no turning back now. As I sat back, looking at the paperwork, I realized how much we had risked for this, and how much we had already lost. Clara came into my office later, her face tense. "You okay?" she asked, though we both knew the answer. "I don't know," I replied, my voice distant. "But we have no choice but to keep going." The silence hung between us for a moment before she nodded. We had no guarantees anymore, only hope, and it was running thin. It was the middle of the week, and things were only getting worse. The markets were in free fall, and every call I received only added to my growing anxiety. My phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. "Ethan," he said, his tone cold. "I've been watching your moves. This isn't working." My heart dropped. The thought of failure hit me like a punch to the stomach. "We've invested too much to back out now," I said, trying to hold on to the last shred of hope. "But you're losing control," he replied, sharp and direct. "If you don't take immediate action, you'll lose everything." I paced around my office, the words sinking deeper with every step. "What do you suggest?" I asked, my voice strained. "You need to reassess. Cut what's not working. Focus on your core assets." His words were practical, but they felt like a death sentence to everything I had built. "I'll think about it," I said, though I was already starting to make the mental list of what I would have to give up. "You don't have time," he warned before the line went dead. I was on my own now. I spent the rest of the day making calls, each one harder than the last. Clara and I had always believed in our vision, but now I wasn't sure if we could make it through. Pressure was overwhelming. I had always been an optimist, but the weight of everything falling apart was crushing me. Sitting across from Clara that evening, I tried to mask the panic. "We need to make the cuts, don't we?" I asked, not looking her in the eye. She nodded slowly, her expression grim. "It's the only way forward," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I could see the toll it was taking on her too. We had pushed so hard, but now it felt like we were fighting a losing battle. The thought of losing the company, losing our dreams, made my chest tighten. "We've come so far," I whispered, almost pleading. Clara didn't respond immediately, and in that silence, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on us both. "We have to do what's best, even if it hurts," she said finally. I nodded, trying to convince myself that it was the right thing to do. But deep down, I was still holding on to the idea that somehow we could turn things around. The next morning, we began the painful process of restructuring. It was as if everything we had worked for had been reduced to numbers on a page. "We have to sell some of these assets," Clara said as we sifted through the spreadsheets. The idea of selling off pieces of our company felt like we were giving up our identity. It was everything I feared, the culmination of our failure. But there was no way around it. We couldn't keep going on the path we were on. "We need to make a decision now," I said, my voice sharp. "We don't have the luxury of time anymore." I watched as Clara marked several items for sale, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't just about the assets, it was about letting go of a dream. As we made the final cuts, the sense of loss settled over me. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I a businessman, a failure, or something in between? The weight of the decision felt unbearable, but I knew it was the only choice we had left. After hours of deliberation, the decision was made. We had cut what we could, but the reality was sinking in. This wasn't a short-term setback. It was a loss. And I was afraid of what came next. The call came a few hours later. It was Daniel again. "You've done what you needed to do, but the market's not going to wait," he said, sounding like the predator he was. "You need to move faster." I bristled at the command in his tone. "We're doing the best we can," I snapped. "And I'm telling you, you don't have time," he insisted. His words stung. It felt like he was pushing me into a corner. He was right though, the clock was ticking, and we had no guarantees left. The future was uncertain, and the only thing I could rely on was the next move, but I wasn't sure what that was anymore. Clara was already pacing, her anxiety matching mine. "What now?" she asked, her voice quiet but desperate. "We keep moving forward," I replied, though I had no idea what that meant. As the days passed, the reality of our situation began to set in. We had made the necessary cuts, but it wasn't enough. The pressure continued to mount, and I couldn't escape the feeling that we were only postponing the inevitable. I had become a shell of the man I once was, optimistic, confident, ready to take on the world. Now, I was just trying to survive. Clara called me late one night, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore," she said, the words breaking through my haze of stress. "We've lost too much. Maybe it's time to walk away." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always known that the possibility of failure was there, but hearing Clara say it out loud made it real. I don't know what to do anymore, I admitted, my voice breaking. The idea of giving up everything we had worked for was terrifying. But what was the alternative? As much as I didn't want to, I knew that walking away might be our only option. I woke up to the harsh reality of our situation. The market had crashed even further, and my phone was flooded with calls and emails. Every single notification felt like a weight pulling me deeper into the chaos. Clara was already at the office when I arrived, her face pale, eyes tired. She had been up all night, going over every last possibility. "Ethan, we need a miracle," she said, the words hanging in the air. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. "How much longer can we hold on?" I asked, almost whispering. Clara's silence was louder than any answer. We were running out of options. Our mentor's advice echoed in my mind. Sell what we could and pull back. But I couldn't just give up. We had one final shot, a risky move that could either save us or ruin us completely. "We're going to have to take a bigger risk," I said, looking at Clara with a mixture of fear and determination. "We have no choice but to go all in. It's the only shot we've got left." The decision was made. Clara and I spent the next few hours pulling every string we could. We reached out to investors, potential partners, and anyone who might be willing to take a gamble on us. The clock was ticking, and every second felt like it could be our last. As I sat on the phone with an investor who was reluctant to commit, I couldn't help but feel the pressure weighing down on me. "I know it's a big risk," I said, trying to sound convincing. "But if we don't act now, we lose everything. We've got the potential to turn this around, but we need your help." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, he spoke. "I'll do it. But you need to deliver." My heart raced as I hung up the phone. We had secured the backing, but the stakes were higher than ever. "This is it, Clara," I said. "We either make it or break it." She looked at me, her face a mix of fear and hope. "Then, let's do it." With the investment secured, we dove headfirst into restructuring. We were on the clock. Time was no longer our ally. As Clara and I reviewed the financial data, every number seemed to push us further to the edge. The decision to go all in had shifted the balance. The stakes were now higher, but so were the potential rewards. The pressure was suffocating. "We have to make the cuts, Ethan," Clara said, her voice cracking slightly. "If we don't, we'll bleed out." I nodded, my mind racing. Every cut we made felt like a loss of something important, something we had worked so hard to build. But we didn't have a choice. "We have to be smart," I replied. "We focus on what will bring us the most return. If we do this right, we can recover." But the doubt in Clara's eyes told me that even she wasn't sure. And neither was I. It felt like everything was happening in fast forward. We were pushing through meetings, making decisions, and scrambling to fix what we could. Yet, no matter how hard we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were racing against time, and losing. I sat in a meeting with potential partners, explaining the plan and trying to sell them on our vision. "I know this is risky," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have the foundation to turn this around, and I'm asking you to trust us." The partners exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, one of them spoke. "We're in, but you'll need to prove your worth fast." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As I walked out of the meeting, I turned to Clara. "We've got one more shot, but we need to execute perfectly. No room for mistakes." The next few weeks were a blur. Every decision, every call felt like we were walking a tightrope. But something began to change. Slowly, we started seeing progress. The market stabilized, and our risky moves began to pay off. Clara and I spent hours in the office, working side by side, both exhausted but pushing forward. "It's working," Clara said one evening, looking at the numbers on the screen. "We're actually doing it." I could hardly believe it. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But as the days passed, The fear of failure never fully left me. I knew that we were far from being in the clear. "Let's keep pushing," I said, knowing we weren't out of danger yet. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." The pressure was at its peak. I stood in front of the investors, every eye fixed on me, waiting for an explanation. This is it, I thought. Either we make it or we fail completely. "No." My voice wavered, but I pushed forward. "We can still turn this around. Trust me." I took the leap. The gamble paid off. Our last-ditch effort was gaining traction. Clara and I shared a quick look. We were in. But doubts lingered. "We can't afford a single misstep," I said, my voice full of nervous optimism. Clara's phone buzzed. Another potential investor was interested. "This is it," she said, excitement and disbelief in her eyes. "We might just be able to save it." My heart raced. I had to remain calm, but the hope was growing stronger. The final decision came down to one last investment. "This is our chance," I told Clara. We both knew the risks. But if we didn't take it, we would have nothing left. I couldn't stop now. "Let's go for it," I said, the weight of our decision sinking in. The moment we waited for arrived. The investment was confirmed. Clara smiled, a mix of relief and disbelief in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. But I knew the battle was far from over. We had one chance left. The days after the big move were full of uncertainty. But something changed. The numbers began to turn around. We weren't out of danger, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. "We might just make it," Clara said, her voice lighter. As the weeks passed, we rebuilt what we could. The investors were satisfied. I knew we had earned another chance. But the weight of everything lost still lingered. "This isn't over yet," I said to Clara. "But we've made it through." The reality of our journey hit me one evening as I sat alone, reflecting. We had risked it all, but somehow we were still standing. What if we hadn't taken that chance? I thought. The answer was simple. There would have been nothing left to fight for. Clara and I finally took a step back. We had survived the storm, but at a cost. "It's not what we imagined," she said. I nodded. "But we're here. That's what matters." We knew we could rebuild from here. As we moved forward, I realized the journey had changed us. We weren't just business partners, we were survivors. "We've lost a lot," Clara said. "But we've gained so much more." I smiled, knowing she was right. We had won, against all odds.